Hello and welcome to Biology 10B. My name is Rusty Fiore and I'll be your instructor. Sitting at home right now, I'd like to do a brief introduction for you to the class. It's going to be an exciting semester. We're trying some new things this term. I think you'll enjoy it. So I would like to start with a brief introduction to the theme of the class this semester, and then move on to the basics of the organization of the class and how we'll meet all of the requirements. So to start with, let me share my screen with you, and let's see, we'll move on to the next phase. Oh, you can see that boring part of my meeting requirements. Let's start with some basic ideas from your textbook. And so this is a graph from Campbell, if you use that textbook. It's a standard graph that you might find in any intro bio textbook. And we're starting with sort of the big picture, and we'll zoom in to meet all the requirements for the class. But I'd like to start with the idea of biomes. And biomes are kind of the way we organize biological phenomenon at the level of the whole planet. And so there are these general communities that you might find around the planet, like tundra or different types of forest or grasslands or deserts. And they're organized and sort of categorized by two factors, the annual mean temperature and the annual mean precipitation. And so if you had the temperature and the precipitation of any coordinate on the planet, you should be able to predict the type of biome you'd find. It's really nice, right? Pretty well organized, seems very predictable. But I would like to argue that maybe this isn't really how the planet is organized today. So let's take a look at the organization that they proposed for the planet. And you can look at the map of the planet and see where all the different biomes are found. You know, tundra is up in the north, and broadleaf forests and coniferous forests, deserts like the Great Sahara Desert, or even the deserts of the southwestern U.S. We live, by the way, in sort of what they call here the chaparral environment, sometimes called the Mediterranean environment. So there's our little patch there of the chaparral or Mediterranean environment. Here it is all around the Mediterranean. You would find it around just above and below 30 degrees north and south latitudes, where you have cold waters in the ocean with warm waters on the land, and you get these interesting patterns. Anyways, so that's kind of how your textbook or most textbooks would organize it. But I'd like to suggest that that's not the way things really are. And that's due to some interesting phenomena that recently people are more and more aware of. And let's start. This is an idea that if we looked at these biomes maps, say in the year 1700, they would pretty much lay out with mostly these natural biomes dominating the landscape. Some of the reds and yellows that you see in here in the 1700s, these are sort of urban and agricultural environments. This map, I think, is a bit ethnically biased. It shows great civilizations, if you will, sort of in China, sort of in India and the Middle East, Europe, and Africa. It has left out, however, civilizations in South America and Central America, which were there at that time. It also, these colors, the gray and the sort of light ice color blue, these indicate sort of wildlands, like there's nobody there. But oddly enough, if you really look at the history of the planet in 1700, most of the planet is fully occupied by humans. That is, all of North America is covered with like 20 million people living there. But they indicate here that it wasn't. So there's a bit of racism built into these diagrams. But anyways, this is more about the transformation. So I would argue in 1700 that most of the planet was being used in different ways, mostly by sort of hunter-gatherer and sort of native agricultural folks everywhere. However, as we move on, the civilizations that we think of when we think of civilizations in Asia, in Europe, etc., begin to take up more and use more and more of the landscape, such that by the time we reach 1900, a majority of the continents, except South America here, are being utilized. That is, the surface of these continents are being completely modified by humans. And certainly by the year 2000, a majority of the surface of the planet is being modified by humans directly. And we've gone from talking about biomes to something called anthromes. And anthromes are these things like residential irrigated croplands, rice villages, or you can notice that there are things called urban and mixed settlements, which are these sort of red and sort of dark spots you see around, and they're growing. And there's a reason for that. The human population grows and takes over the entire surface of the planet. And I don't think you can really study the surface or ecology of the surface of the planet without considering that the whole thing is modified by humans. Now, it would be daunting, to say the least, to try to study all of that. We can slide down here and look at this lovely graph. By the way, I put this paper that I'm referring to here by Ellis et al. In the first module in the Canvas webpage in case you want to take a look at it. Anyways, you can notice as you go through time, so 1700 is here, and we move the columns going from left to right through time. And this is showing the relative proportion of the surface of the planet occupied by these different biomes and anthromes. And you can see it goes from, very little of the surface being completely used by humans to, in the year 2000, more than 75% is modified. And I would argue probably much more than that. It's probably more like 90% of the surface of the usable lands of the planet are being modified. And one of the interesting things that you can hardly see on the graph is the increase in the urban settlements. Now, they're not taking up a lot of space, but they are being utilized more and more. In fact, there's a really odd shift in humans away from rural environments to these urban settlements. In fact, if we look at figure 3 here, and we kind of go through time, same way from left to right, 1700, 1800, 1900, 2000, you can see the proportion of the human population that's found in urban centers is growing exponentially. It's thought that right now we have about 50% of the human population of about 7.5 billion people. So that's about 3.5, a little more than 3.5 billion people living in urban environments right now. And it's proposed, if this trend continues, that by the year 2050, 2/3 of the population of humans will be found in cities, mostly giant mega cities around the world. And that is interesting. So one of the most, I think, dynamic anthromes you might study would be the urban environment. And it just so happens that you live in one. Yeah, you live in one of the great anthromes on the planet. I have a little graphic here. You can check this out. This shows the growth of cities over the last several decades. And you can see the size, the population of these different cities around the planet from about here, 1990 onwards, takes off exponentially. And the cities, I think, are the fastest growing anthrome biome on the planet. And so what I'd like to do is spend the semester studying this anthrome, cities, urban environments. And so we're going to focus on that. The entire semester will be focused on studying this. And really, it's interesting because there are very few large theories about urban spaces and urban ecology, and the evolution in urban environments, and how do you even go about studying it. And so we're going to do it in a pioneering effort, if you will. Um, so the first page, the home page for the class, has some basic background and some ideas about urban ecology. And then when we get right into it, go to modules. Um, we'll start. So we're going to try at first to describe the urban environment, the ecology of the urban environment. And so your check-in assignment, so we're going to do it by breaking up the urban environment into sort of whatever ways it's currently organized. Since Los Angeles is one of the great metropolises of the world, it has its own structure internally. Los Angeles does, and you live there. So what we're going to do is break up in teams at first based upon something that we have in common, right? So perhaps it's everybody that lives in a certain city. So this check-in assignment, which is a discussion, you're going to post some stuff about yourself, but including where you live or where you want to work for the class. And work, by that I mean you're going to go outside and look around. Okay, it could be in your neighborhood. Literally, you can just do this right out in front of where you live. That's perfectly fine. Some people prefer to study somewhere else. Maybe they have a job somewhere that they spend a lot of time in, and they'd rather use that as their study site. But you're going to pick a geography, a region, a place in Los Angeles that you feel you can walk around in and make some observations. You're going to, obviously it'd be best if it was your home, but it doesn't have to be. Then you're going to find people in similar situations, either like similar, they live near you, or maybe you'll find people that live in similar settings, right? So if you live in say a high-rise condo downtown, maybe there's some people that live in condos like in Long Beach, and some live in condos, in Century City, and maybe, condo people get together, as opposed to maybe there's several of you that live in places that are more rural, right? And or maybe you live in a recent tract home with about a quarter-acre lot, and that's something you might share in common. Or maybe it's just a bunch of you that live in Arcadia and you just wanted like Arcadia people hang out. Anyway, so we're going to form these like groups, and then we're going to set off to describing the urban ecology of the environments around us. We're going to explore the idea of urban ecology. There's a little assignment here for reading a scientific paper. This is just to get you started, get me aware of where you're at in reading scientific literature. So there's a little assignment there. Once you've established some teams in that discussion, there's a little teamwork intro and some team contract where you kind of form it officially, turn this in telling me who is on your team, and then you launch into the project. And the first part is we're just going out and exploring the ecology around us. So there's some iNaturalist stuff. If you've never used the iNaturalist website, we're going to use that pretty extensively in the class. So it's an app you can get on your phone, and it has one of the most powerful AIs available to identify species. So when you go outside, you can use your phone, take a photo, and the app will tell you what species it is, and it keeps track of all your observations on the website. So we're going to take advantage of that. And we're also going to be examining what other people have seen around you using that same app. There's also a lab kit to get from PCC, or you can purchase your own if you like. Details of that is up here under material supplies and textbook. And you can, well, I'll let you know when we can pick those up at PCC if you want to. It has a little flip scope, like a little microscope, and some other stuff that'll allow you to do the lab portion of this activity. So there's some microscope. We're going to explore the sort of microscopic diversity around you, maybe in the soils or water and stuff like that. We're going to explore plant form and function in these different groups. And you're going to do an experiment on the global warming and the change in plants in this as well. And all of this will be supported by the lab kit if you choose to pick it up at PCC, or if you choose to purchase one. Anyways, the initial breakdown is to go out into your environment and try to figure out the different subgroups within your study area. So let's say you're doing this in Arcadia, and you're walking around in Arcadia, and you're like, okay, what are the sort of subgroups, the smaller habitats, or we could think of them as patches in the environment. For instance, there might be a difference in the ecology or biology of the sort of street medians versus yards. There are parks versus yards. There are commercial spaces that might be different than suburban spaces. There might be a difference in yards in that have single family homes versus yards that are occupied by condominiums. And these might be little patches or habitat types. And so you start to figure out how your habitats are constructed, identify those patches, and then we want to survey them separately, right? And so that we can compare the biodiversity and the ecology of these different patches. Your team you'll be working with will help. You guys will work together to define what these patches are and stuff. There are some papers. We're going to do a little symposium. Your team will break up. Each member of your team will read a different paper. You're going to do like a little symposium, which is where you share what you've learned from these papers together. We'll do that in a larger discussion and smaller discussions by paper, so that you have some background. These are the most recent sort of studies that are about how you break down urban environments and how you think about urban biodiversity and urban ecology. Anyways, once you got that all together, we're going to do a little team proposal where you're going to explain to me how you're breaking things down, how you're going to approach studying it. And so you're going to send me that, and then we'll Zoom meeting team by team, and we'll go over. I'll give you some suggestions. We'll talk about what you've got so far and what you're thinking, so that you're off on the right foot. That all happens. You can notice we're getting going. We're just kind of getting things defined and whatnot in the first almost month of the class, right? First several weeks for sure. Just kind of getting everything started so you're off on the right foot. And then you move into things. This is the plant form and function. So where you're doing a climate change experiment and measuring, plant parameters. So you're looking at how the plants are different in these different patches that you're surveying, but you're also looking to see how they change with climate change. So that's kind of an interesting experimental thing. There are different phases to these bits. If we scan back up here, I know it makes me dizzy scrolling through this, but we have the beginning of individual assignments. Every person, every individual, no matter what your team is, you'll be doing some very specific little things. You're exploring the same micro habitats in your areas, but each person's going to turn in little bits so that I know that everyone's doing equal work and learning what you're supposed to be learning while doing this. Just a quick aside, this class is a project-based class. That is, all the learning takes place by you doing projects, not so much by me blabbing away and talking and whatever. So it's a learn by doing kind of class. So everybody has to be doing in order to be learning. And then you'll turn in some things. These first beginning individual assignments are just little assignments, like go out, find 10 species in a couple patches, post them to iNaturalist, tell me about them, etc. And that's just kind of getting you started. And then the next set, which come up over here, individual assignments phase 2. This is, by the way, March 28th through April 11th. This is where you've done these assignments bigger. That is, you've added more species, more observations. There's more thoughts to have about them. I'll ask you questions, things to read about. So there's more stuff that goes on, and this is where you begin to think about turning in your plant climate change experiment that you've done in the proposal above. And then your first team sort of does their summative stuff from April 21st to May 9th. And these are the 4 things that you kind of been working on as a team. And that's the patch atlas, that's describing those little micro habitats, factors influencing your urban biodiversity, which is a question about comparing those patches. And then we'll bring in the ideas of social justice and health equity in your neighborhood. And that's really an application. How does urban ecology apply to sort of human planning and human issues? And so we'll start bringing those ideas in a little more here. We're going to, at that point, then you'll be finishing your sort of that teamwork. We'll do a little unit kind of in the individual assignment category where we look at 3 different papers and there's discussions about them where you post some ideas, and their focus of this symposium, which is a where you study papers and share your ideas, that's about evolution in the urban environment. And then we'll form new teams somewhere in May, mid-May or so. And I'm going to make these new teams based on members of different groups. So the idea is to now comprise groups from a diversity of different habitats, if you will. So that totally depends on how you guys self-organize in the first round, how I'll organize the second round. But probably there'll be groups a little bigger, 5 to 6 people in a group, and now they're about the diversity of areas. And so you'll be synthesizing the stuff you did in the first part into larger, better understandings of how the urban environment is structured and then what that means. So there'll be a little project there. It ends with a sort of a presentation that you're going to do virtually. Most people will do sort of a video presentation, like a voiceover PowerPoint or something for this. You'll see when we get there, but it's kind of a new set of teams, and it has just a couple of things we're doing with that. And then below that, on the Canvas page here, there's like some resources to help you identify microorganisms. This is there'll be a written exam, take-home exam that we'll do later in the semester. And then it's really just asking you about these projects we've been doing. And then there's a whole unit, a whole module on science as a process. So as I go along and ask you like, hey, can you write a hypothesis about this? Or describe your methods for this? Or it's time to present our results for this experiment. And maybe you haven't done that before. And you'll notice here, there's a whole section on writing results, how to do statistics, how to do graphs, how to write conclusions, how to make posters. All of the sort of mechanics of reporting this stuff is all found in science as a process. And then at the very end, just so you know, I put a link to 4 different journals or sources of information about urban ecology. So if you're like doing some research and you're trying to find stuff, it's a little hard because there aren't a lot. There's 4 different urban ecology websites there. Anyway, so that's how the course is structured. Um, and there's no multiple choice tests. There's no standard types of exams. It's all learning by doing. So I hope that helps you to get started. I'll pop in some videos here and there. I certainly do them by request. If you have like, can you explain this a little more? I'll be happy to do that. Real quickly, if we go over to the syllabus for the class, this is the usual syllabus thing. My office hours, those are real tentative. What I've done in the past is if you want to Zoom, we can make a Zoom meeting. Just message me in Canvas and say, hey man, in the next couple of days, could we do a Zoom meeting? I need to talk to you about this. Or my team and I would like to talk to you about something else. Perfectly fine. I put some hours up here under office hours, 1 to 3 on these days and 10 to 12 on Thursdays, etc. And those are the times I guarantee I'll be sitting down at my computer. So if you message me in Canvas, I'll get back to you right away. I'm not on Zoom live during that time because I did that the first semester and I just sat around staring at my computer a lot. So I don't like to do that. But anyhow, what I will do is irregardless of time. So it doesn't matter what time. If you're like, hey, in the next 3 days, can we Zoom? And I'll send you back some like times on those days that we could do that. And you tell me when you can, and then we'll make that work. And I find that to be much more productive. They can be short, like even 5 minutes, whatever you need. And time wise, once again, I can be very flexible. I'm not real good at like 5 in the morning, to be honest. And probably not after 9 o'clock at night, because then I'm trying to relax a bit and, wind down and all that. But otherwise, and even on weekends if necessary, I'm pretty open to like popping in and doing a quick Zoom video. Um, A couple other things, if you look through the syllabus, there's some basic ideas about the turnaround time, participation, grading, all that stuff's there. It's pretty basic. The course summaries there. One thing I've tried to do is, if you notice and you're looking at that, is that there are very few days where there's more than one thing due, and they're often related if that's true. And so anyhow, you can kind of scroll through. The work's pretty well evenly distributed throughout the semester. Let me show you one more thing about the grading, and that's under assignments. The way your grade will be distributed is there's a category called individual work, which is 40% of your grade. And then there's teamwork, another 40% of your grade. And then the core exam is really this sort of it's like a summary essay. I'll give you some prompts, you'll write to that, which is also individual. So it turns out individual work is 60% of your course grade, whereas the team projects are 40%. And for all of the team efforts, no matter what they are, there are reflection assignments where you will evaluate your team members and stuff. So between that and the team contract, usually there's not too much conflict about the teamwork in the class. This, I do have an honors option, and I'll be putting more info in there as to what that honors project it is. So if you're in the honors program and you want to get honors credit for the class, let me know. We'll did that contract at the beginning of the semester, and we'll determine what that project it'll be. It'll be some elaboration on the stuff that we've done in the class. Okay, well, I hope that's enough. I hope that's a brief enough introduction, but gets you started. And you want to jump right in on that first discussion. And yeah, I look forward to working with you this semester. Thanks for playing.